So for today's sermon, are you glad I'm here?
Yes.
Oh. Well, that wasn't meant for me specifically, all of us. No. So a few weeks ago, I watched a documentary. And don't worry, I know this is the second documentary I've watched that I've spoken on, but this is going to be it for a while. So I don't know if you've seen this. It's on Netflix, and it's called Daughters. You should really watch it. So it tells a story of a father-daughter dance held inside a prison. And I assumed, it would be very touching, but I really wasn't prepared for exactly why. Because it wasn't really about the dancing that stayed with me, it was the faces. The fathers put on their suits and the daughters put on beautiful dresses, and the ritual of getting themselves together, it was beautiful. And there were reunions, and then the dance begins. And as those fathers caught sight of their daughters, something softened. And as the daughters looked into their father's eyes, something opened. For a few precious hours, neither was defined by those prison walls or however many years of separation. They were just father and daughter, perhaps with complicated stories. Watching them, I started wondering if every human being carries some version of the same question. When you see me, are you glad I'm here? And not, do you admire me? Do you love me? Something quieter than that. Does my presence matter to you? I felt that in the room, and it carried even more weight. And after so much separation, I felt those daughters look into their father's faces and wonder, have I remained alive in you? Does seeing me bring something alive in you? Because there's something profoundly life-giving about being received with joy. And I don't think we ever outgrow that need. Children don't first discover who they are by looking into a mirror, examining their own thoughts. Before they understood language, they became fluent in faces and body language of others. A smile, a look, eyes come alive when they enter a room. That is noticed. And before we know our worth, someone else's welcome begins to teach us. Some of us grew up surrounded by that kind of welcome. Some of us grew up with more complicated situations, perhaps families that were burdened or struggling in some way, or couldn't say aloud what they were feeling. They loved you, but it was complicated. Some of us learned to stay quiet. Some of us became the caregivers. Some of us learned to shrink or disappear. We inherit stories before we're old enough to decide whether or not they are true. So maybe the spiritual question worth asking is, whose eyes are you still living through? Whose judgment are you still carrying? Whose confidence in you still gives you courage? Sometimes we discover we've been living inside someone else's misunderstanding of us. Too much, not enough, too sensitive, too capable, and without realizing it, we begin seeing ourselves through their eyes, but their seeing was never the whole truth about us. And maybe this is where healing sometimes begins. Not because another person heals us, they can't, but because the space between us can give us a different experience from what we've learned to expect. Where we expected judgment, maybe we're met with acceptance. Where we learn to disappear, maybe someone has made room for us. Where we expected not to matter, someone is genuinely glad we are there. The old experiences cannot be erased, but now there can be an experience beside it. And over time, those experiences can have a healing quality. We begin to discover that what happened before doesn't have to keep happening. The eyes through which we first learn to see ourselves don't have to be the eyes through which we see ourselves forever. And maybe with time we can hold some tenderness even for those who could not see us with joy, wondering what might have become possible if they too had been more deeply blessed. Blessing can interrupt what otherwise gets passed from life to life. Perhaps that too is how blessing changes the world. What we did not receive does not have to become what we pass on. The Jewish philosopher Martin Buber said that the I comes into being through thou. The I comes into being through thou. Basically, we don't become ourselves alone. Sometimes another person sees something in us that we've stopped being able to see in ourselves. That doesn't give us a new self. They help us recognize a truer one. We become through what flows between us. And that's where I started thinking about blessing. Because as I watched Daughters, I realized I wasn't simply watching a dance. It began to feel like I was watching a blessing in action. So when we hear the word blessing, we may think of it as a prayer, as a benediction, or the good things in our lives that make us say, I've been blessed. But in the Jewish tradition, blessing is deeply connected with life, with fruitfulness and flourishing. Blessing strengthens life. A blessing doesn't only feel good. It's not just our wish for another. It gives life. Something opens, courage and hope can return. We feel more connected, more ourselves. Sometimes we don't know exactly what happened, just that we leave differently than when we arrived. We know blessing by what comes alive. Maybe calling something a blessing is simply our way of placing a little reverence around what gives life, or saying something life-giving happened here. This mattered. When I looked at the dance that way, I saw something different. Nothing had been fixed. The prison walls were still there. The years were still lost. The daughter's hurt probably hadn't fully disappeared. And yet, for a little while, life was flowing where it had begun to close down. Conversations returned, laughter returned, touch returned. Hope had room to expand. And maybe that's what blessing looks like, not the absence of brokenness or hurt, but enough room for life to move again in the midst of it. And blessing doesn't always have to feel good. Sometimes telling the truth when we need to hear it. Sometimes being challenged makes us more honest or courageous. So maybe the question isn't really, did this make me happy? Maybe it's, did this make more life possible? And then I realized something else about daughters. At first, the fathers were blessings to their daughters, but their daughters were blessings to their fathers. They both needed to exist to occur in that moment. So for those few hours, each became a reminder that the other, neither was, their story was not simply their story. Because blessing isn't simply something we do to another person. It's something that happens between us. And it's not necessarily about doing or saying the right thing. Sometimes we can have all the right words, and somehow they just don't reach us. And then sometimes we encounter someone who stumbles all over their words, doesn't say the right thing that we think we need, and somehow we walk away feeling lighter, feeling more understood, more alive. Have you ever felt that?
Yes.
Can't explain it, but something occurs in that moment. Because maybe what matters most isn't exactly what they said or what they heard, it's what happened in that space between us. Something softened or opened. Somehow a little more life entered the room. And maybe there's a mystery in that. We shouldn't try too hard to explain and just accept it. Two people meet and somehow something becomes possible between them that neither could have created alone. Do you realize how extraordinary that is? We may not have the words for what was passed between us. We only know that something came alive in us, and it just was. Maybe that's why we call it blessing. It's our way of naming the mystery without needing to explain it. Sometimes blessing is carried simply by our presence. Someone was really there for us, and they weren't trying to fix us. They simply met us. And somehow in being met, something in us began to move again. We felt something, maybe something we hadn't felt in a long time. And we know the opposite too. Some encounters leave us feeling smaller. Not everything that passes between us gives life. Blessing moves in both directions because we meet one another. It's just never a small thing. In ways we may never see, we participate in life, whether it contracts or expands, with all the people around us every day. And maybe that's the blessing. Not all the right words we said or all the things we did for one another. Maybe the blessing is that somehow between us, fertile ground was created. Something in which life could take root again. We didn't make the life happen. We simply helped create the conditions in which it could emerge. And to me, that's magically beautiful. And maybe that's the humanity of blessing, that life isn't ours to create or control. Maybe this is one of the extraordinary mysteries of being human. Sometimes our presence calls us forth and life in another person that was waiting for a place to emerge. It simply needed space. And it's more than just being nice. That's participating in another's becoming. And maybe that's why sacred ground isn't only found in churches or congregations. Sometimes it's found in the prison gymnasium or around the kitchen table. Sometimes in a conversation no one else will ever know even happened. We often think of service as something we go somewhere to do. We volunteer, join a group, join a committee, and those things do matter. But some of the most important ways we serve life may happen in everyday encounters. When one person leaves our presence feeling a little freer to be themselves. We don't have to manufacture blessings, go around trying to do this, set out to give someone a blessing. We don't have to figure out what everybody needs because we'll never really know. We don't have to act in ways that try to heal others. That is not the role in the blessing. Maybe our work is simpler. Just become available. Be aware how powerful that is. Listen, stay curious. Maybe that's one of the deepest things love does. Love makes room. We don't need answers. The heart can make room. And there's a question we might ask ourselves. What happens to people in the space around me? Not, do I do the right thing? But can people fully be themselves with me? Can someone bring their joy without competing with mine? Their sorrow without me trying to fix it? Their truth without needing it to be more mine? We don't always get that right. But maybe becoming aware of the kinds of presence we offer is itself part of becoming the blessing. Because in a distracted world, attention itself can be a blessing. To really pay attention to one another as human beings and to say without words, for this moment, you are not invisible to me. Our UU tradition speaks about the inherent worth and dignity of each person. Maybe blessing is one way that belief becomes lived. We don't give another person worth. Their worth is not dependent on us. They've always had it. But maybe we can become one more pair of eyes through which they can see their worth that has always been theirs. We're not giving them something they don't possess. We're helping them to remember, and they may do the same for us. Because blessing isn't always becoming a blessing. It's about receiving one and staying open to that. And receiving begins with noticing. Most of us are pretty good at remembering what hurts us, the criticism that stayed with us, the person that made us feel small, the moment we felt unseen. Those experiences do matter too. But what if we became just as attentive to the other evidence? Who leaves me feeling more like myself, less guarded? What gives me courage for life? What gives me life? Pay attention to all of that. And maybe receiving blessing means allowing those experiences to become real evidence too. This person saw me. I was welcomed as I was. Something in me came alive. This story gets to be part of your story. The old story is part of your story, but it doesn't get to be the only story. We may not always be able to choose the things that shape us, but we can become more conscious of what we allow to shape us now and of what takes shape in others when they are around us. And what we receive begins to shape what we have available to give. If someone receives us with openness, we may become more able to offer that openness to someone else. If someone carries hope for us, one day we may find ourselves carrying hope for another. One life strengthened becomes more capable of strengthening another. And maybe that's how blessing keeps moving. And maybe that's how the world changes too. Families are shaped in this way. Congregations are shaped in this way. Communities are shaped in this way. We become what flows between us, and so does the world. In Hebrew scriptures, God says to Abraham, I will bless you so that you will be a blessing. The blessing doesn't stop with Abraham. It keeps moving. We receive it. We pass it on. We receive it again. Like one candle lighting another, the first flame loses nothing. And yet there is more light. Sometimes we carry light. Sometimes we need someone else to carry it for us. And both are sacred. And what brings me back to those fathers and daughters, we don't know what happened when the music stopped and the daughters went home. We don't know if every promise was kept or the relationship was actually repaired in any way. But for a few sacred hours, another story became possible. Life had more room than shame. Relationship had more room than regret. Hope had more room than despair. A daughter could remember she was cherished. A father could remember that he is more than his story. The past wasn't erased, but it wasn't the only thing present anymore. Something else happened in that room. Joy, recognition, breath. Neither was finished, but both were becoming. Maybe carry two questions with you. What gives you life? And what happens to life around me. So maybe the invitation for this week is to notice the blessing. Notice what comes alive in you because of another person and let yourself receive it. And notice what comes alive in others when you are fully present with them. You don't have to create a moment or define it or even understand it. Just notice it. Just be awake enough to recognize it when it comes and open enough to let it change you. And I keep going back to those faces in the movie, those daughters searching for their father's faces, and the quiet question, when you see me, are you glad I'm here? And again, we know that question. And I think some part of us may still be asking it. But somewhere along the way, we also become the faces of the people we are reading. So sometime this week, another human being is going to encounter you. You won't know their whole story, and you don't need to. You only need to remember that they have one. And maybe some part of them is asking, when you see me, are you glad I'm here? Maybe ours become the kind of faces that answer, yes, I'm glad you're here. So may we remain open to the blessings that find us, awake enough to recognize them as gracious and enough to receive them. And may we become available to the blessings that move through us, because we become what flows between us. And perhaps little by little, so does the world, may the blessing keep moving from life to life, from heart to heart, like one candle lighting another, until there is more light and more room to flourish in us all. Amen. Next. Whew. Okay, time for the offering plate. Let us pass the plate and thank everyone, thank you everyone for all your generosity in spirit and your gifts. Your presence is the biggest blessing. And anyone online, there's the link to the on the website if you'd like to donate at another time.
Sandra, is this film good for the kids, the daughters to watch with the father? It's okay. Oh.
Mm-hmm. Judy, if you want to do that later, I might have some. I might have some. Yeah.
I don't know. That's hers.
Okay.
I said, let's do it later.
Yeah, I've got, yes. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that. So in closing, as we leave today, we don't need to be looking for those extraordinary moments. Just pay attention what gives you life. Receive it, and may you be awake to notice, and may we know blessing by what comes alive in us. And may it be so.
If you like this video, please like us on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and click on the bell to be notified whenever we post a new video. Thank you.